Good.
Ian, it's too hot for fire. Can you just make it snow?
Yeah.
Well, I had the ISS space station up there, which is kind of fun, but it keeps cutting out.
Hmm.
Hey, Brian. Nah. All right, I think I'm going to attempt to go ahead and push this live to the Facebook platform, which is what people say, I'm sure. Hey, Brian. Share in a group, right? No, share to a page. There we go. Next. Hi, Janis. Oh, you're on mute.
Takes me a little bit to get it in.
Oh, I know. Yeah. It's probably cruel of me to even address you in the first like 30 to 45 seconds of joining a Zoom call.
Still trying to shut everything else I have open that I don't need and find what I should have open.
Joshua, do you know what this says? Facebook is telling me live producer is the new way to go live. The version you're currently on will soon no longer be available. Try live producer. Is this a thing?
There was some kind of update notice on my Zoom, so maybe it's something to do with that.
All right, I'll try it.
Let's
We
go
did
for it.
the live producer a little while ago, and all it did was just it tries to. It's a UI thing.
Okay.
It's not like any functionality. It's just all the buttons we think we know are where they're supposed to be are not there.
Do I want to use a stream key or do I want to use a paired encoder?
Stream key.
Okay, thanks, guys. All right, I think we're doing it. Fingers crossed.
Ian, I can't hardly hear you.
Who, me?
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Really,
Okay.
really quiet.
Let me see what I can do about that.
I have mine turned.
Ian is a soft-spoken guy. He's more like commanding with his presence rather than the volume of his voice.
And somebody is saying they have no audio.
Kind of digging his fireside chat, though. It's pretty
Right?
solid.
Yeah.
I'm
I
sitting
was
here
going
all
to put
jealous
up
of
a
John's
background, but I didn't have time.
That's all right. What's up, Larry?
Hello.
I think
How's
the gang's
everybody
all
doing?
here.
Excellent.
I'm doing all right.
Hey, Tom, looking good. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's been a little while. Good to see you. Thanks for doing this with us.
It's been ages. It's good to connect with folks. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we can just kind of jump into this thing. Real quickly, I wanted to say that just some upcoming DPA events. We're going to have our third Thursday breakfast on June 18th. So we'll send out a link for that. We're still doing everything virtually for the time being. And then we are participating in Women in Film. They have an expo on June 27th that's going to be all virtual, and the DPA is partnering with them on a producer panel that'll be at 10 a.m. on June 27th. And then our next monthly meeting on probably July 14th, we've been kind of switching up the Tuesdays, will be on streaming, and Larry has come up with a great name for that meeting, which is the uploads and downloads of streaming. It works better in print. You get it. You get it.
I love it.
So anyway,
I
those are
applaud your
upcoming
dad
events.
joke.
Thank you. Thank you. It's technically Larry's bad joke. I tried to give him credit, and maybe he doesn't want it.
He said dad joke, and he was very right. It's
Oh,
very
dad
joke.
joke. Sorry. Larry, by the way, that was fairly echoey. I don't know.
Who, me? Check one. Echo?
Yeah. Yep, it's better. There you go.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, let's jump into it. I guess we can all introduce ourselves quickly. I have, I put in the meeting invite who everybody was, but just to kind of go around. So to get a frame of reference. I'm Rebecca Case, and I am the DPA president and also a producer. I'll hand it over to Tom.
Hi, Tom Dennis. I'm the Vice President of Brand Strategy for Xperi Pro and also President Emeritus of the AMA DFW.
Trish Avery.
Hi, Trish Avery. I'm the Executive Director for the Dallas-Fort Worth local of SAG-AFTRA, representing Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas.
Then Ian.
Hi there, I'm Ian Loomer. I'm the Vice President of AMS Studios.
We'll throw it over to Janis.
Hi, I'm Janis Burklund, Director of the Dallas Film Commission, and been here a really long time.
Brian.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Brian Hwang. I'm currently the president of AICP Southwest and also the executive producer of Threaded Pictures.
John.
Hi, John Doty with Dallas Lighting and Grip.
And Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Wright. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say that's our panelist. We still have two more people to introduce. I was about to correct myself, but please go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Ryan. I'm the director of video production for AMS Pictures.
And Larry.
Is that me?
Yep.
Am I echoing? I'm Larry Rodriguez. I am a producer, director, technical director here in North Texas, and I am also the DPA Vice President.
And Joshua.
Hi, I'm Joshua Wethington. I'm a board member of the DPA and just here to monitor questions. So
thanks,
keep 'em
Joshua.
coming.
Well, thank you all for being here for this. This is certainly an interesting time to be in our business, and I wasn't even sure where we would be when this date finally came around, if we were going to be working or not. And I actually am pleased that productions have seemingly started up again. And we're certainly not back to where we were pre-COVID, but things are starting to move, which is exciting. I wanted to just by the way, Larry, thank you for pulling these facts. We have the sort of current pandemic data points, just for everyone to kind of have mulling around in their back of their heads. The number of COVID cases as of today in Texas, confirmed cases is 74,978. 79,000 people have recovered, and we've had 1,830 deaths. In Dallas County specifically, 10,000 cases, 228 deaths. In Tarrant County, 5,400 cases, 165 deaths. In Denton County, 1,300 cases, 31 deaths. And in Collin County, almost 1,300 cases and 34 deaths. So, not nothing, certainly something that we need to be respectful of and mindful of as we try to get back to work. I know even just for me, going out to the grocery store or going out to run errands, I feel like I'm still happy to wear my mask and sanitize my hands every 30 seconds, but it seems like, at least just from looking around, that the public at large is starting to kind of not be as concerned, which is interesting. I don't know if that's people just being over it or truly thinking it's not a concern, or both. But when we talk about putting our employees in a confined space where they're going to be close to one another, sharing a lot of equipment, working long hours, it's already an environment that's can easily, breed sickness, just of the typical kind. So this is definitely an area where we would be vulnerable, and it's hard It's hard to distance. It's hard to remember to keep your mask on. It's hard to remember to sanitize something every time you touch it. So I'm interested to talk to you all about your perspectives on this and what you've been thinking about or doing or preparing as a way to help your crews and our community get back to work. So Janis, would you like to kind of start us off from not only like sort of the state of the industry in the Dallas area? Well, yeah, I guess essentially the state of the business in the Dallas area, and what you've seen coming from the government.
Well, the government side is kind of a hot mess. The industry has been some chomping at the bit to get started and others being much more cautious. The ones that are more anxious have been the commercial people, and clearly aware that some haven't waited, which I feel is a little unfortunate. I just hope they're being safe as possible. The main reason we wanted the state protocols to come out was just so everybody would have a baseline of where to be safe, which is what the state has put out, is just the minimum that they feel is necessary to go to work safely. We've been inundated since things closed down with companies outside Los Angeles, New York, wanting to come in and shoot commercials or B-roll or things. Been trying to help the locals as well to understand what was going on at the state level, at the local level. As you all know, that they opened the state-wise June 3rd and announced the minimum protocols and a registration form. The city has not started permitting yet. It's in the attorney's office. They're reviewing it. I don't have a timeline from them yet. But as most of you know, permits aren't always required to film in Dallas. So it's just the things that would require a permit, those can't quite go yet. We have some things in development. There's a television series getting ready to kick off. Hopefully they'll start pre-production here in July, right after the 4th, and go into production in September is their hope. We've got a couple of indie films as well in pre-production, or getting ready to go into pre-production, I should say. So it's been a rather busy time. At the same time, we've been trying to do what we can on our side to prepare to help everybody. We've added some new categories to our production directory under health and safety to try and help find sources for cleaning and disinfecting and PPE and the new safety coordinator positions that are going to be out there. So we're doing everything we can to try and prepare to best help everybody. And you'll see some of those are on our directory now. If you guys think that there's something that we've missed, please feel free to let us know and we'll consider adding those as well. And, I'm happy to take questions, but that's kind of the long and short of it.
Thank you, Janis.
Hey, Rebecca, do you want to let people
Yeah.
know that they can ask questions? Joshua is going to monitor, and I know some people have been asking about questions. So in the text, and Joshua, are you looking at Facebook as well? Yeah, and then so we will get to questions.
This is gonna, sorry to pull back the curtain here, but is our live stream working?
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
I can't figure out how to make it work. I don't know. This is not my area of expertise. So I am looking at it, but I have literally no idea what I should be clicking on. So that's my failing, and I will be accountable for that. But I cannot. I can't. The button is gray.
So
I don't know.
So as this reposts later, then we will be engaging.
Monitor the Facebook comments, and I will get back to your questions.
Got it. Okay, but we will take questions from the chat. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Larry. By the way, any of our panelists who want to, feel free to jump in as we have this discussion. I don't necessarily have to call on anybody. But speaking of which, I'll go ahead and call on Tom. From looking at from your perspective, you know, the type of production work that's, you know, is being requested or is needed, what are you seeing, and what are you, I guess, what are the people you're talking to, you know, what are they weighing as far as like the risks and, you know, the need to get messaging out there? What are you seeing?
It's just like the rest of us. It's just chaotic as can be. As Janis was saying, there really are two schools. Those that are ready to get back to work now and don't care, and those that are still hunkered down at home, trying to be real careful. As with everybody, there's so many marketers laid off or furloughed or working from home that I think the production has been hit as hard as anything. There's still research work going on. There's still messaging work going on. There's planning, but I haven't seen a lot of activity other than that first flurry of, you know, commercials that were knocked out to talk about how sympathetic the world was to what's going on. There's not a ton of production. I will say I had my first photo shoot yesterday, which was kind of nice to get back out and start producing again. But it's coming. I just feel like it's lagging behind because of kind of the state of the union right
now. Are any of you hearing from, this is I think an interesting question that was posted in the chat by Justin. Are any of you hearing from people outside of Texas that are trying to do any shoots here? No, it sounds like a no.
Rebecca, it's Trish. We have had some ad agencies who have come in to Texas to do commercials, as Janis alluded to. You know, these are specific jobs that we have been able to look at and monitor and give assurance that they can do it in a safe manner. But Tom is right. It's a chaotic time. And we're not sure how this is going to roll out. It is going to be basically, I think, from our point of view, production by production. What are you doing? How are you doing it? Where are you doing it? How many people are involved as to whether or not it's possible? What we've seen from SAG-AFTRA's point of view is that the voiceover work has continued throughout COVID. It hasn't slowed down at all. Disney Animation, and I heard an incredible statistic today that Looney Tunes is now having more viewers than oh dear, what was the TV series with the dragons? Just went right out of my head.
Game of Thrones?
Yep, more than Game of Thrones. Thank you. So, you know, that's kind of surprising for us. But production, we know, has been looking at the interior states to roll out first, those states that seem to be opening up sooner, Texas being one. So to answer your question, yes, we have had outside ad agencies investigating whether or not they can do it. Is there a lot of it? No, not yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey Rebecca, I've fielded some inquiries about out-of-state work. You know, there are folks just trying to figure out how to get things done. A lot of marketers are trying to figure out, you know, what's possible right now, even though they might not know exactly what type of messaging they do want to get out. When they do have that figured out, they're trying to determine what could be done. Is it a remote shooting situation, or is it like what Trish said? Is it are there a state like us or Georgia that's now open that they could try and shoot in? So I fielded some inquiries, but I think it's a little tough that I think it's been a little bit of a miss that we have not been able to bring more out-of-state work here, especially since there's been recent word that LA is going to start being able to film in the coming week. That it's, I think we missed out a little bit.
Yeah, the window was a little more narrow maybe than we thought, and because the guidelines from the state only came out, what was that, a few days ago, within the last week?
June 3rd.
Yeah, there you go. Which, you know, I was sort of interested to see those, and would be interested to get your perspective as well. Like, you know, because I read that white paper that was put out about I guess 2 weeks ago or so. Time is just slipping through my fingers. I have no idea. But, you know, that was pretty comprehensive and had a lot of really interesting stuff in it, you know, like a dedicated COVID compliance officer and making sure that even, you know, break room areas or, you know, wherever you might be taking meals would, you know, everybody would be 6 feet apart, you know, a lot of stuff that like makes sense and we should be doing. But, you know, is going to be really, really challenging and really, you know, interesting to try to manage from a logistics and cost standpoint. And then you look at the guidelines from the state, and they're actually like, they're fairly doable. You know, it's taking temperatures, it's making sure that people aren't sick, you know, doing a questionnaire, we're encouraging masks, encouraging hand washing, encouraging social distancing. Which is all the stuff that we kind of know about. But it was interesting to see that I thought that they were relatively relaxed, kind of compared to like that white paper that had come out.
Janis mentioned this before, but those state guidelines are really, that's like the bare minimum, right? So
yeah,
every individual company on top of that will certainly has the latitude to be stricter and as strict as they would like. So, you know, from personal experience, now that we're open, I actually have a shoot coming up in a couple weeks. So it's taking all the guidance and all the white papers and guidelines and suggestions that you've seen kind of ad nauseum and trying to figure out exactly what's the right mix for your own personal company and what's the risk tolerance of your company. And those guidelines, you know, the 3.5 pages issued by the state, as Janis mentioned, is really just kind of the bare, is table stakes, right? It's like, that is the bare minimum of what we should do. But I'm hopeful that that a lot of folks and companies take it upon themselves to enforce a little bit stricter policies than that.
I'll be curious. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ian.
I was saying I'll be curious too, Brian, what the market will be willing to bear, as well as far as what people are willing to put up with in some of these situations. As a studio, you know, we are putting in, you know, I've got a 10-page document of here are policies and procedures that we're putting in place as a studio. And I've been spending, you know, the past week getting ready. And this is what I think it takes to be safe. And you know, it's above and beyond, you're saying they're table stakes. It's above and beyond that. But will clients coming in be interested in upholding that? Or will they think that's overkill and find other ways to go about it? Like, where it'll be interesting to see that. Here's where we think everyone should be. And are people going to acquiesce to that early on? Or are they going to go, no, we don't need to do that. We think that's too much. And we're going to figure out how to go about it a different way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like a lot of things are, like I said, you see all the guidelines, you understand what they mean and why they should be in place. But then when you actually put them into practice, you kind of learn a little bit in terms of, is this overkill? Wait a second, that we need to do this more. So it's going to be really interesting in the next month or two to see what's been successful and not. And unfortunately, not successful is has some high risk involved.
I'm already hearing some feedback about, you know, clients coming to the set and not wearing masks and it freaking the crew out. You know, what do they do? It's the clients. Also, I think it comes to some basic stuff. You know, they're moving equipment around. Do they stop and wipe it down every time? They're feeling like they don't have time to do that. That's where I think, you know, people have to factor in some extra time needs to be required to try and do this stuff safely. I don't think any of us as a community in our industry can afford for it to go bad and to have a bad outbreak and a bad outcome. That would set us back even further. So I hope everybody keeps that in mind, that they're being safe when they're out there.
A couple things, real quick, there is a link in the chat that a couple of these white papers and some of these guidelines I put where you guys can download those. So if you want to access some of the things that we're talking about. And if we have more coming up, we'll put those links and things in here as well. Rebecca.
Oh, I was just on the same topic, you know, Janis, you were saying that, you know, you'd heard some stories of clients coming in and not, you know, not wearing masks or not being as mindful or as, you know, about all of these regulations. And I was thinking about the other side of the coin. You know, when you have a really large corporate entity that has to to cover themselves from a liability standpoint. You know, you might have clients that are actually dictating, you know, something above and beyond what you as a production company or as a studio might even already be doing. So I'm wondering if, as this evolves, you know, some of it may be client dictated as well. Has anybody had any conversations with their clients that, you know, have sort of led them down that path?
Actually, this would be a good one. I don't know, for like Andrew and Ian. I know you guys is running AMS and AMP. Could you speak to that, Andrew?
We have not had any. We've done our part as far as, you know, preparing our studio and our spaces based on the CDC guidelines as best as we can, and we have communicated that to our clients. For the most part, the clients just, I guess, assume that we've got it under control. We haven't had any clients kind of bring it up and be concerned. The concern has been more on the crew side. Just last week, we had a similar situation that was just brought up where the client, and actually the on-camera talent, who, this wasn't an actor, this was more of a, you know, an employee of a company, just didn't wear a mask. And, you know, so we have signs up in the building saying we encourage you to wear one, but it's not necessarily law. And you know, do you want to have that uncomfortable conversation with your client or someone who's going to be on camera to put a mask on? It's a sticky position to be in. But no, as far as clients, you know, we've been very upfront with them, what we're doing, and everyone's been pretty understanding about it. So far.
Agreed. Yeah. Most of the clients, when we lay out what we're doing and how we're keeping our space and our people safe, we're meeting all those requirements and then some. I think going forward, I'll be very curious, you know, producers just operationally and logistically, how they keep up with some of these requirements, because as we all know, there are things like Clorox wipes and Lysol wipes and spray sanitizer that's very hard to come by. I mean, I've had to dig into the, you know, deep corners of the earth to get some stuff, and I've made some interesting connections along the way, which has been fun. But you know, we've got enough stuff.
You buying some stuff that fell off a truck, Ian? I
don't ask questions, you know. No, I do. I ask a lot of questions, actually.
You know, a guy who knows a guy.
Selling on the street corner.
You've got a
yeah, but you know, go ahead.
Very interested.
Yeah. A lot of people are making, you know, hand sanitizer now that you wouldn't expect, which has been fun. You know, and so we're getting creative with, you know, I've been looking up like chemical compounds. We're kind of like making our own cleaning supplies at the studio so we can put in spray bottles and sanitize. So you got to get creative. And so I'll be very curious, especially with shoots that are out in the field, how logistically and operationally they handle some of these things when trying to get all these necessary supplies in.
It really concerns me with it getting hot now and everybody's sweating and being outside, and how long a mask can last in that. And I know I have an N95 mask. You can't do very much and breathe very well. So, boy, I hope people can find ways to shoot inside as much as possible, at least this summer. I know it's somewhat safer outside, but not in this heat, I don't think.
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, John, from your perspective, you know, talking about wiping things down and keeping things clean, what are your conversations like with producers, production companies that you're working with, and other crew around this stuff?
Yeah, so I was at on location shoot 2 weeks ago. 2-day shoot, 10-person crew, smallish studio, maybe 1,500, 2,000 square feet. So it's pretty kind of close quarters. The producers were very on top of it. They had all the regulations figured out, and we followed those very well. We had a safety meeting in the morning, talked about everything. Everybody had to have a mask on. You know, through the day, you know, you have to fight your old habits because you have to maintain that distance away from people. And we're doing interviews and they can't wear a mask, you know, so you do have that in the room. So yeah, it's a challenge. You just have to kind of slow down the schedule, I think, and build in more time, because there's everything just goes slower. If you can't work side by side people. You have to kind of move in the lights, and then you step out of the way, and the audio comes in. It's a slower process than you might think.
Yeah.
John, it's Trish. Did the shoot have a COVID compliance officer at all? Someone designated just to monitor that?
We had a PA, and I'm not sure if that was her job, but she had the temperature monitor, and she would take the temperature in the morning and in the afternoon as we were leaving, then log that. So I believe that was her role. So yeah, they had very good intentions and were working really hard. You know, in the heat of the moment, some things happen where you get close to somebody and, you know, there's a little bit of risk involved there, but I think we're learning, and I think that's part of the process. We're going to be with this for a year or so, and we just have to learn how to lower the risks as much as possible.
Right. And that's what we're seeing in some of the other productions. I know there's a low budget film that's actually shooting in Corsicana because they had very, very few COVID cases. Weren't able to get approval there. There's another film shoot where they have bought the expedited kits to see if someone is COVID negative, and they're doing the testing on set. In fact, you have to show that you're negative before you can step on the lot. But what we're seeing are more and more productions that are assigning a COVID person, coordinator. And I know IA actually has a training for that right now that they put together. And I think there are about 6 people who are going through that training currently in the state. Imagine they'll be grabbed very quickly. But medics have also, who already have that training, are being hired specifically to kind of give a production that comfort, and so that you guys can move faster and really stay focused on what you're doing as artists and crew.
That's interesting. I was wondering how we as an industry, if this is something that we adopt as a role that, you know, is filled on every set, what that even means. Like, how do we define who can be a COVID compliance officer? And, you know, because, you know, yes, it could be one of those things where you just tell a PA that this is your domain, you gotta, you know, be in charge of that. But that's, you know, you could have a great PA who does a really great job and is paying attention to everything and can talk to everybody, but you know, likely you're going to need somebody who has gone through some sort of training or whatever. So it's at the very least, it's maybe taken more seriously.
I like the white paper that came out where they said it's helpful to have somebody who's autonomous from the shoot, so that they're kind of outside the hierarchy and can't be, you know, kind of told what to do. So having a set medic or somebody whose real job is health compliance and safety is an interesting thing to have. You can't always do it, but it sounds great.
Back to the guidelines at the state level, right? It's going to be everyone's own level of risk on what they want to do. You know, since there isn't something like the IA has the compliance officer, we don't have that here, right? We don't have to necessarily have that on a non-union production. So some companies will be willing to hand a touchless thermometer to a PA. Others will absolutely want to get a set medic. And so it's going to vary from company to company, but I just hope that overall there's a responsibility across the board.
I think the unions and the insurance companies are going to play a big part in this. I think, you know, the larger projects, they're already wanting to get, you know, medics or nurses or somebody that's got medical training to be doing that role. And the smaller films are looking for a PA to do it. And the state doesn't mandate it can't be a PA. I think it's going to be on everybody and their risk tolerance, how much they want to put into it. I hope they go for the higher level.
Same. I just feel like, you know, especially on the commercial side, so many of us share the same crew, and I just hope that everyone takes the same care that we all want.
which I think is interesting to be important to log all of this information and to have that. And I'd love to see some kind of even like shared system where, or information, because all these people, they work on the same sets and move around. And if somebody gets infected, I think contact tracing is going to be incredibly important in this. So making sure that shoots are keeping good records is just incredibly important.
One of the things the state is asking to do is asking productions to register. It's not a hard requirement, unfortunately. It would be a great way to be able to track everybody if it were a harder requirement. The state isn't a regulatory office, so they can't really enforce that. Neither is my office.
I do, John, I know we're talking about the medical side of this, but can you speak to a little bit about what you do just as from a technical standpoint about the gear, like all the stuff that we're talking about, when to clean it, how you clean it, just kind of walk us through a little bit about what you guys go through with the gear.
So yes, done a lot of thinking and researching about this. So when we do the a la carte rentals, gear goes out. We don't know who's used it, how they've used it, what safety they've had. So when it comes back, that gets quarantined. We can wipe it down. We've got a bleach solution that works on light stands and such, but then there's also fabrics. So one thing I've noted is there's a time component. And if you just quarantine it for 5 days or whatever the time component is for each type of surface, the virus will die over that time. So we're slow enough where we can build that in and use that as one of our main techniques right now. So, you know, it's just again, another learning curve. And once the business picks up, it may become a little bit more of a challenge to clean lights and all the fabrics and things. But right now it's going pretty well.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, the focus has been, or has moved more on, you know, transmission through the air. You know, it's moved from sanitizing everything and your hands all the time, which you probably should still do, but I'm not going to tell people not to do that. But you know, it's social distancing and wearing a mask and all that stuff, which I feel, at least personally, you know, it's easier for me and less socially strange to be sanitizing my hands all the time, but to wear a mask, like, even though I embrace it and I want to do it and I think it's the right thing to do and my head is in the right place, it's really hard when you're in a place and nobody else is wearing a mask, like to be the one to put one on. You know, and depending on your role in the hierarchy of a set, and depending on what's going on around you, I mean, I think it's going to have a huge sway on compliance unless the producers are truly, you know, producers and other, you know, management are really making it top priority and, you know, setting that example.
Does anybody want to talk to the, all right, so, and I agree with you, Rebecca, that the CDC is kind of changing things up on us. They've done this a couple times now where, oh, this is how we need to focus on this. And then now here, no, it's not so much services, or yeah, services, but it doesn't live on there very long. So we do, you know, it's kind of this idea though, is that expected? Do clients want to see that? Is that good for everybody on set to kind of go through these procedures? If we initiate all that, great. But I kind of do want to pose this to maybe Andrew, Ian, whoever wants to chime in on this. Budgeting for this, right? So we have extra costs now. So as a small, you know, producer or a small crew to a facility to a bigger production, larger production, how does anyone want to talk about how we're addressing that? Is that something we eat on some level? We work that in, like, you know, these things that we need, these other elements. What do you guys think about that? How does this hit the budget? You know.
I'll speak to that. So we have not passed on any cost to the client as yet or considered it, because most of the things that we have done following CDC guidelines are pretty inexpensive, you know, hand sanitizer stations and Lysol, and having some extra masks and gloves. We got some of the paper, you know, surgical masks just to have on hand if somebody needs one. You know, we had extra plexiglass in our garage, so we made some dividers for our control room environment. If we're going to be, you know, if we can't spread out the crew, we can put some dividers up to allow some, you know, protection. You know, but I think, you know, for some, I can see for some of these productions having to pass that on. And I just think that's something you want to have a conversation with your client as early as possible. But we haven't done enough productions to really know from our end if we're going to need to do that.
I think there has to be some level of agreement on the client side to understand that some of these things to be compliant is going to cost more. I mean, I don't think that our production company should be responsible for paying a set medic if, you know, it's not something that I would have done otherwise, or, you know, things that might be able to get done in a 10-hour day might take 12 hours now because we want to try and stay physically distant. But I don't think by any stretch we should be the ones responsible for covering those 2 hours of time. I think there has to be a level of like an uncomfortable conversation with a client that has to take place to be open about that communication.
I would hope it wouldn't be that uncomfortable. I mean, these conversations are happening at all levels, particularly at the higher ups in the ad agencies, the studio levels. They're all talking about additional time and cost. So I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody if there's an extra line item in there for health and safety.
And I think some of it too depends on what you're including and potentially how many people are involved and all of that. You know, talking about this, and Andrew's right. Right now, we haven't as well charged anyone yet for any of this stuff, but I can see a time where we might have to. If you have 25, 30 people on set who are all using 2 masks a day that are $350 each, I mean, that adds up and that hits a bottom line. And you know, the reality is you don't go into studio management to make tons of money. Like, it's, you know, we do it because we love it. So how do we keep the doors open and keep all this hand sanitizer adds up? I think everybody right now is going to be very mindful of it and use a lot more than they would any other time, and rightly so, and we want them to. And in addition to that, you know, we've worked with a company that we're looking at doing like an electrostatic fogging in the evening if you feel like this is something you want to add to your shoot, and that costs, and it does a deep clean that clings to all the gear, and that way then it happens overnight, so when you come the next day, every day of your set, you know, it's fresh. So all that adds up, and so I think there will be some additional COVID related charges, and even outside the production industry, I'm seeing this in other things. The real question is, right now, I see us maybe like adding it on as a line item, but will this go on long enough that it just starts becoming part of the day rate? And I know as a studio, we're also trying to acquiesce to producers who are asking for extra things because they have to make their days go longer, or they have to split their crews into, you know, more setup days to keep less people on set, or to keep socially distanced because things take longer. So I think everybody is collectively trying to work with each other and understand that we're still trying to make the show happen. So.
Yeah, the way I see it, I think it's kind of a little bit of, maybe we'll get into this a little bit later too, but you know, this is a ability to sell yourself. This is part of communicating what you're doing. It's like, you know, that you can get that money a different way. Like I said, you can kind of bake that in. So if your day rate goes up a little bit, you charge a little more for the studio. You don't have to line item out health and safety. But if that might be the better way to do it. So people go, hey, look, this is now you, my client, can now show all your people. If you're in a corporate situation, you know, you're dealing with maybe an internal producer at a corporation, they can now pass that on to their people. Say, look, this is the new world. We're covered here. Our people have us covered. They're lining this stuff out. So just kind of a way to kind of handle it. I know the cost is there. So could that be a benefit? Could we show that in a positive way, I guess, is one way I was thinking about it as well,
And
Tom
something
can maybe get into a
mentioned,
little bit of that too.
yeah, something
Go ahead.
mentioned the comments as well, is as we're considering adding these things in, and something that I've been dealing with lawyers with and our insurance with, is does that make us legally liable if we say there's a cleaning fee involved in this to do it? Does that now make us culpable for this kind of stuff? And it's an unfortunate gray area that I think won't be solved for a couple of years.
Yeah, great point.
Well, and I think too, this is going to be a tricky, hairy thing, especially in our, our largely non-union work environment, is, if people do get sick and we have to cut them from a crew, what is there any sort of consideration for paid leave or anything like that? I think it's obviously going to be largely up to the production, unless they're protected by a union or otherwise. But that was something that was mentioned in the white paper, is like in a way to encourage people to self-report if they are ill, to keep them from coming to set and getting everybody sick and potentially shutting your entire production down. You may have to be willing to provide payment to have somebody stay home. Has that been something that any of you have thought about or considered or wrangled with? I know it's kind of it's a hard thing.
It's definitely something I've thought about. I don't have a solution yet.
Yeah.
If someone else has a great idea, I'd love to hear it. But I think, for the commercial side of it, it's a little easier because our times are shorter, right? We're typically
Right.
1 to 3 day shoot. We're not shooting for weeks on end. So, if someone comes in sick, and let's say it's someone in the G&E department, maybe one person goes down and they're just light one person that day, or a PA has to step up and be an extra pair of hands, or that type of thing. I think when it's obviously a bigger thing when it comes to a series or a movie.
Yeah. Well, certainly will be challenging. I guess to pivot a little bit, I'm just looking at some of the questions. This is a good question from Lisa Normand. So looking at these guidelines, one of the things, these are the ones from the state. It says, while in production, close sets to all visitors, clients, office personnel, and other non-essential personnel. If we're working in the commercial industry, we are used to having a contingent of clients on set who are, they're not non-essential. I don't, you know what I mean? But, they maybe have a few people there as kind of a vanity thing or whatever. Have any of you thought about that? I mean, these guidelines as they read, it sounds like the state would want you to have no clients there.
They don't want them on set. They prefer that they do it remotely through video village kind of situation, a remote app.
Well, I know, at least from my personal experience, one of the ways that you get engagements and get clients excited about spending money on productions is they get excited about getting to be there and getting to leave the office for a few days and come sit on set and interact with the talent and just be immersed in it. I mean, people get really excited about that. And whether it's overt or unconscious, I think that that's part of the appeal and a part of why a lot of money is spent on this stuff, apart from, of course, the craft. But, I think, has anybody had this conversation or similar conversations where they're having to kind of try to make this sell and convince clients not to show up?
So I know we've installed a couple of Nest cameras in our studio. It's very Big Brother. It's a little creepy, but it allows, we do have a gigabit fiber connection to the building. So we're able to get high quality footage out over VC so they can watch, camera feed. but this also gives them another way to kind of see what's going on in the studio, and they can bop around between, you know, the control room and the studio A and B, and, you know, and kind of see what's happening. So right now, at least currently, clients have been limiting themselves, which is nice, but we're gearing up for that conversation, and how we're handling that, at least, is limiting people in the building. So by that, they get to decide who's important to the set and how they're going to be on that.
I don't know if I can chime in here, but Trish, I know you were talking about a little offline here about pre-production meetings. Does that kind of tie into this? Because you guys are actually having these conversations a little bit earlier on than maybe you would have, right?
Absolutely. So right now, as I said, we're looking at each production individually to see what their needs are. And the production units are generally coming out with very extensive risk assessment plans, telling us exactly, you know, where they're doing locations, you know, all the basics, you know, how many and where and what, but devising a plan on how they're going to handle the COVID situation. And also with, you know, makeup and hair and who is going to be their compliance officer. And those production meetings are happening pre-production. So if you've got a client or a production that you're not sure of, or you need someone to kind of have that conversation with them, sometimes it's easier for us to do that for you, just to make sure that all things are covered. I would think that a client coming to you from an ad agency or any advertiser would understand the concerns about COVID safety, because they have employees themselves. And they're having to look at that situation, whether people are working from home or back in their buildings now. So I would hope that they would see this as a reasonable thing and understand that things are morphing. But I'm like Rebecca. I know they like to come in for the barbecue and for the stuff. Absolutely, we get that. And we're happy to see them. But what you're going to see now that the white paper is out, and that was a culmination of all the unions and DGA and SAG-AFTRA and IA and Teamsters and even some of the studios chimed in on that white paper. But what you're going to see in the next few days is a more scaled down version of our protocol from SAG-AFTRA and DGA on talking about zones. So zone A would be those people who have to be on the set, cast and crew, how that will be managed. Zone B might be your video village. And who are those people, and can that be done remotely, or does it need to be on location? And all the details about catering, makeup and hair, those kinds of details will be coming forward in more of a 1 or 2 sheet for us. I'm happy to share it with you when we get it. But in the meantime, if you want us to look over your safety protocol of what you're doing, happy to do it. Send it my way to trish.avery@sagaftra.org. I'll get it to the people who are looking at this and give you some feedback on it. It's important, though. It's really important, I think, if nothing else, that you guys register your projects with the state, so we know who's filming what in the state, in case something happens and we have to go back and do contact tracing, because we know crews work multiple jobs, both union and non-union, and we're all in this together. So safety is key for all of us.
Hey, Trish, that zone thing sounds like something I saw from I think a different state's guidelines, or a different country's guidelines, really, where it was something about like a color band system, where if they're wearing blue, they're allowed to be everywhere on set. If it's red, they're only restricted to certain areas.
Right.
Is that the
similar? Absolutely. I mean, you know, you've got a good idea. It's a good idea. And we understand that, you know, none of us have walked this road before. And we're going to learn real world what it's like for you. And there will be adjustments, I'm sure. This is fluid, just as the virus is fluid. So as long as communication is key. And as long as we stay in touch, if you have an issue that's coming up, not sure how people are handling it, or we need to talk about how it's being handled, let's do that, because that will keep Texas growing and the business growing.
Agree.
Awesome, guys. And Ian put that link, the registration link, in the chat, so you guys have it there.
Thank you. So sorry, I was just looking over some of our talking points. Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see, Trish, what that looks like. So I guess, and this is going to be a gray area. This is, you know, something that Ian alluded to. But you know, we know so far that at least COVID specifically is not likely to be covered by insurance policies. But you know, what are you guys thinking about and talking about from, you know, a liability standpoint, from a legal standpoint, you know, how we can protect ourselves and protect our crew, and can protect any stakeholders in these projects?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough issue, liability all around. I know that it's going to be extremely difficult to prove that someone contracted COVID on set, especially in the commercial world. We've said it on this panel many times already, but crew goes from one set to another all the time. And in between going from one set to another, they're going home, to the grocery store, to the drugstore. So I think it's going to be virtually impossible to really figure that out, that it was contracted on your set. I know personally our insurance carrier doesn't have a COVID clause or anything like that. So I think it really goes back to making sure that our sets are as safe as possible and do our part in trying to limit that exposure.
Yeah, no underwriter that I'm aware of has specific COVID or pandemic insurance for sets, but I imagine they'll be including it or writing it over the next, you know, coming months, year. I think we'll be seeing that.
All right. How about Joshua or anybody else see any other good questions from the chat? I guess we can start maybe opening it up a little bit more. So Q&A.
Yeah, we've had a few questions, and I guess a lot of people are wondering about makeup. You know, some suggestions have been actors need to come with makeup already, like hair and makeup done, but a lot of actors don't know how to do that professionally for on camera. So has anybody had any experience with the guidelines with that?
You know, in our set, the shoot I was speaking of, Debbie had a shield, face shield on, as well as a mask. And I know how hard the masks are to wear all day long. I can imagine how she felt, but I think that's the only way you can work up close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
Something too, I've been talking to makeup artists about this and how we can stay safe in our makeup suite. And, you know, they've already for years been sanitizing their brushes and doing that. And I purchased a makeup UVC box, which I think is pretty cool, that you can put your brushes in there and it blasts it with UVC light, which is actually something that I've started to build too in like massive form. John, you might find this interesting, of just this big UVC box you can put cameras in and stuff like that and blast it with light, which is maybe overkill, but it's also a fun weekend project. But yeah, makeup artists, I think, are very aware of where they are in proximity to the situation. And so masks and face shields and sanitizing as much as you can. I know the AICP guidelines have a section specifically for makeup artists that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it talked about using single-use products, so that, or at least dedicated products for each actor. So there's limited cross-contamination.
And that the face mask stuff too can extend to audio guys, right? You gotta wire people up and everything. You're getting up close and personal with people too, so that could be another way. And I think that gives you some protection yourself back, because you're actually covering your eyes and your nose and your face and stuff. Whereas a mask is a little different, but you got a plastic shield on you to walk up there. That works for both of you.
Yeah, they were using boom mics. They didn't lob anybody. I don't think they wanted to worry about that part of it.
Joshua.
And then, likewise with actors, with makeup, a lot of the actors in the chat have been saying, you know, has anybody heard of any standards for us specifically. You know, like obviously we're on camera, we can't be wearing a mask during these commercials, you know, but how do you deal with that? So maybe John can offer some insight to his recent shoot.
Yeah, so most of the, it was a documentary style, so these were just people off the street coming in, and a few of them came in with masks, and then as soon as they went to makeup, there's no mask. So you just have to give them wide berth. And then the interviewee, she took her mask off when they started. So, you know, that's another challenge. You can't really do a great interview with a mask on. So,
well, I'm sure Trish, you know, SAG will have their guidelines for how to.
Absolutely, and
Absolutely.
that's the zone idea. The crew is masked in some form or fashion, and PPE and all of that, while the actors and quite frankly, sometimes the staging is that the actors are social distancing. So in the scene, so the cameras have to be set accordingly. But of course, you know, actors providing performance can't necessarily wear a mask unless it's called for by the script. But when you're cut, then and they step away, then they're asked to put masks on.
Do we want to get into it all? How, and Trish, maybe this is for you too. Like, what if you're put in a situation and you, you know, things don't seem quite right, or you feel like maybe as an actor, maybe a little bit less of crew, but that maybe the people aren't taking precautions. How do you handle that situation?
Oh, absolutely. And we, you know, advise whether you're cast or crew if you have an issue on one of our sets and or a concern. You can call the local office, you can call us, but it may be a night shoot or it may be a weekend shoot. There is a 1-844-SAFER set that's answered 24/7. So that's 1-844-SAFER, SAFER set, SET. Just, you know, call, talk to the person, describe the situation. It is transferred to the nearest person who is handling those issues, and someone will get back to you immediately. Of course, if there is an accident on set, 911, definitely. But for any issue or any conversation that needs to be held, we're here. We want to make sure that everyone is safe.
Good to know. This is kind of an interesting question that Audrey asked is, you know, what do you think the long-term ramifications of this will be? I mean, obviously we're all going to be trying in earnest to do all of this, you know, for as long as we can maintain it. And I guess depending on how the disease cycles, will certainly be part of it. But, you know, do any of you think that this will have longer implications beyond maybe the next couple of months to next year?
Some of the panels I've been sitting in on, there's a lot of webinars going on. Variety and entertainment partners, a lot of different groups are doing them, but they seem to think this is going to have some lasting consequences and maybe some long-term positive changes may come out of it. You know, how long the virus hangs around and if we have a second wave and all that's, when there's going to be a treatment or a vaccine, all those are going to play in, but potentially some of these changes will take hold regardless, and that could be good.
I'll be really curious about some of the tech implications. I know we've been very focused on like the on-set and hygienic and safety ramifications, but you know, I think wireless tech is going to grow and be more important and be more available on set for all positions. And I know we've been doing a lot of remote post with clients, which has been interesting. So clients coming into a room and sitting, you know, with 3 people and your editor for, you know, 8 hours a day for, you know, a week isn't going to happen. And it's been happening less and less anyway. But now with remote post capabilities, I think, you know, people working from home or working from afar are going to be able to have that in edit room feeling. So I'll be really interested to see what happens on the tech side.
Yeah, I feel like in terms of the shoot experience, a lot of it is, like you said, the excitement of being on set. But I think what's been proven this past few months is it's possible to get stuff shot and done remotely. You can, from a post-production side, you can certainly remote into a session. You could do it via postings. You could do it via Zoom and see what's happening real time. I think that is certainly going to be a lasting impact of COVID. I think across the board, when folks are traveling into a shoot, do you need to travel 6 agency folks to a shoot? I don't know that that's going to be the case anymore.
From an actor standpoint, we know that our actors are becoming more technically proficient. They've been asked even to provide production value when in quarantine when they're trying to create projects. But there was a voiceover workshop for our members today that was attended by more than 8,000. So we know that market is increasing and that need is increasing, and even ADR is happening remotely. I think Ian's right. We're going to see more and more remote work happening to save money, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Kim asked another interesting question, and she said, we've heard that cast and crew will be asked to sign a release form stating exposure to COVID-19 is excluded from production insurance policies. What will SAG require of their members?
So SAG-AFTRA tells its members not to sign anything. It goes against our contract. So they may be asked to sign, but they should refuse to sign.
And then as a follow-up, if a talent is showing symptoms and has to leave set, is it going to be normal procedure that like a second string of actors or backup actors would be kind of casted and kind of on a backup call? If, say, halfway through the shoot, your main actor is showing symptoms, so they have to self-quarantine, will the follow-up actor come in, or will the whole production be held? Like, anybody have thoughts on that?
Like understudies in theater?
Yeah.
Might be a consideration. I don't know.
I always used to hate that when they did that on my old TV shows. Like, this protagonist is somebody totally different. I'm like, wait a second. What just happened? That's not right. Didn't like it at all, but that's my 2 cents.
I mean, when filming with kids, it's not uncommon to have a backup kid on set. So I wonder if that will become more common.
Oh, so if you're twins, get into the business right now. Twins.
Totally.
Only identical, though. That's all we care about. Bill just kind of made a comment that I think would be interesting. Could groups of crews commit to self-group / quarantine prior and at the end of duration of a shoot? So if you have kind of like a big production, you kind of self-quarantine before that. You stay with the crew kind of in a hotel, I guess, if you're doing a longer production, and then self-quarantine for 14 days afterwards. But that's basically committing to not working for 28 days on the head and tail of every production. So any thoughts on that to the panel?
There was a lot of discussion about that early on the studio side, on the bigger productions, that they were just going to sequester everybody in a hotel, cast, crew, everybody, and they just weren't going to leave to do anything other than work. The latest things I've been hearing is that's not going to work. People they're not going to stay away from their families that long. Yeah. Their families that can't come be with them. So that's starting to fall apart, I think, that idea.
And
I mean, somebody might try and do it.
Yeah, logistically too, even if your crew quarantines, there are vendors and third party, you'd have to, make sure if you have a 3-month shoot that you have all the food in a single place and all the people who are working with you, and what about the hotel staff? And I think actually the NBA was talking about doing, some mega hotel thing was like, hey, we'll get like all of the NBA teams to come and stay in one massive hotel and self-quarantine. And I was like, hey, I want to be at that party. But that's how you'd have to make it happen, is like everyone who is part of the shoot or waits on them or like would all have to quarantine to make that really effective.
Yeah, the NBA, the NFL, they were all talking about variations of that as well. And that's a big one.
Here's an interesting question. Being an extra / background talent is a very important stepping stone for a lot of actors. Is that a position that will now be relatively obsolete moving forward? I mean, I know there's certainly, I've seen discussions of, paring down, obviously, either eliminating crowd shots or paring down, cast so that you can minimize the number of people on set. I mean, I would think that we would be staying away from keeping as few people in a scene as the scene requires. So that might be, a hindrance for people that are just starting out.
A lot of the plans I've seen are calling for crew to also act as extras in occasion. That's going to be challenging on some really bigger stuff, I think, but that's one of the ideas they're calling for.
And there has been discussion about computer generating background.
Really?
So, yeah, that's a fact. So yeah, it used to be very prevalent, and I suspect it will be reconsidered just by sheer cost and social distancing a crowd. How do you do that?
It makes you wonder how it's going to change creative. When you're writing a commercial, when you're writing a short or whatever, how does that kind of come into your thought process when you're thinking about, we got to shoot this? Not only when you thought about how we had to shoot this with certain sets and things like that, now we have to shoot it with the less amount of people, so I think we might see that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had conversations with our agency partners about this, and the way that they're trying to retro engineer concepts into what's feasible or not, and opening on a crowd scene isn't necessarily feasible right now, apart from doing CGI. So it's certainly on the minds of the conceptors.
Well, and something we've been thinking about too is just even in interviews, stand-ins and lighting people. Often we use crew, but if we're slimming down crew, how do we manage that as well? If that's something that's happening, and something we've been using is a local DP has made this 18% gray head called Headley Standwell. It's ridiculous. I love it. But you get a couple of those and you put them around places and you can light to it really well. And it's been interesting to use that as a replacement for, stand-ins.
Well, and even, apart from on camera talent, like I can more easily see how we can start shooting commercials and even TV and film that's, a narrative format. But when you're talking about live production stuff that normally has audiences, a lot of us, even if you're not just talking about like a talk show that would normally have an audience and the host really needs to feed off that energy to perform and all of that sort of stuff. But, a lot of us do live productions, especially, in Dallas, going to, whether it be a large corporate meeting or a convention or whatever, it's harder for me to see us getting back into that as quickly. Has anybody had any experience, thoughts around that?
Well, I can say that being at Visit Dallas, there are people still trying to rebook their meetings and conventions to some degree. So there's some people that are anxious to get back out there in groups. And there's also, as we see more and more, doing the virtual, Zoom team meetings and things. I think we're going to see a mixture for a while.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. We were watching HGTV last night, me and my wife, and their actors were using like little Osmo minis, and I've seen a lot of Zoom and StreamYard where they're just trying to create content. Netflix has been buying more older movie content in the last few months than they have for the last few years because they can't put any new content out. Another question from another Rebecca was, should my focus be to find a way to shoot with a bare minimum crew and cast? So what does everybody think about, where we used to be a 10, 15 person crew is the popular one-man band, or maybe 2 or 3 member crews going to be the new norm for production? Not everybody all at once.
What
Well,
I'm
I think-
hearing, what I'm hearing on all the Zooms are they're trying to go as small as possible, or to
Yeah.
do the pods and breaking them up, or combination thereof.
That's where the Sprinter van for your lighting truck comes in handy. We've got great packages. Little plug for Dallas Lighting who's up there. But no, seriously, it's a really tight package that you can do with a gaffer and a grip, and you can do a whole lot. So who knows how this is going to shake out.
I mean, as companies, as a client, and Brian, Tommy, if you guys want to chime in on this, I mean, would this cause, I mean, no one's ever going to leave video or commercials, things like that, but does it cause people to take things into different initiatives, do you think? I mean, are we going to start seeing print or web stuff, pushing things to different kind of marketing here? Are we going to see any of that and just kind of ride this out a little bit, try new stuff?
Yeah,
how are we going to be affected by that?
Well, I think at first, once everyone, hit the panic button and realized that we weren't able to have traditional on-set production like normal, everyone was kind of trying to refocus to think of how do you create content. And one of the more immediate things that came to mind was animation. Like you said, it was like that, all the Disney stuff that can still keep going and just voiceover work. So we thought we may see a little bit more influx in motion graphics and this and that. One of the things you definitely saw in the first wave of kind of COVID messaging was the use of stock film and user-generated stuff. I mean, the flood of that was crazy. But I think that while there's always exploration for other types of storytelling formats, I think that people and our industry are problem solvers. We're going to figure out ways how to tell these stories through shooting film or video. So I think that while it's certainly an alternative, I don't think that you're all of a sudden going to see an influx of animated only spots.
And in the short term, we'll see some, but it's not gonna solve their needs. You can address some of it. Some of the solutions are great, but in their heart, they'll want to get back to the live action, to the video work. We've had lots of conversations with clients of, all right, what can we do now that's digital? We don't have any other choice right now. What's the low-hanging fruit we can move over now? Just knowing that they've got to get back to the production at some point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, cool. Well, I certainly, I know that there's a lot of ground to cover here, and we could probably talk about this for forever. Does anybody else on the panel have anything else that anything that they're dying to say or contribute?
Thank you, Janis, for all your work.
Yes, thank you, Janis.
Thank you, Brian.
Weeks than in the past year, but it's been great, and thanks for all the guidance and info and inside information coming out of the governor's office.
That's what we're here for. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Janis. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. If this is going to be, of course, an ongoing conversation that we're going to be having for months as we find out more and figure out where the line is, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I really appreciate you all coming on tonight and being willing to share your insight, and hopefully we can continue to provide guidance and figure this thing out, because I know every single one of us is eager to get back to set and to get back to life, pre-COVID as much as possible. So thank you all again. Thank you to everyone who joined. And my apologies once again that I was not able to put this on Facebook and in a live video stream, but we'll get the recording uploaded to YouTube and put it online so people can check it out. So thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
See you all.
Thanks for including me.
Thanks,
Take
Janet.
care.
Bye.
All right. Bye,
Good night,
everyone.